Marcus Tate just wanted a quiet life for his 3-year-old daughter. But in Willow Creek, being a black single father made him a target. When his neighbor's hate turned deadly and a gun was pointed at his child, Marcus had only seconds to choose: run or shield her with his own body. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The sky over Willow Creek was dark gray, heavy with clouds that promised rain. Marcus Tate, a 38-year-old black father, stood at the edge of his small front yard. His hands were buried deep in the pockets of his old jacket. His eyes looked tired as they moved across the quiet street. This was a neighborhood where people kept their lawns neat and clean. White picket fences lined the street. But something felt wrong in the air, like the quiet moment before a big storm hits. Marcus had felt this kind of tension before. Not from the weather, but from people who didn't want him there. His daughter, Aaliyah, was laughing on the front porch. Her tiny hands held a soft stuffed bunny tight. She was only 3 years old, but she was everything to Marcus. Her laugh was like sunshine in his dark world. Marcus used to be an army medic. He worked at Fort Bragg, where Aaliyah was born. The military base gave him structure and purpose. But it also brought sadness. He saw too many friends die. Too many families broken apart. Now all he wanted was a peaceful life for his little girl. But finding peace in Willow Creek was not easy. The trouble started with Karen Whitaker. She thought she was the boss of the whole neighborhood. Karen was in her 50s with sharp eyes and a mean voice. She walked around the streets like a police officer, checking everything. Her rules were strict. No wrong mailboxes, no long grass, no ugly decorations. To Karen, Marcus's simple home was a problem. The paint was a little old and he had one small plant by the door. This made Karen angry because it didn't match her perfect idea of how Willow Creek should look. That morning, Karen had put a note on Marcus's door. It said, "Your lawn is 1.5 inches too long. Fix it by 5 p.m. or pay a $200 fine." Marcus read the note and felt tired. He had cut the grass just yesterday. But Karen left notes like this every day. Each one found something new to complain about. Marcus tried talking to her once. He smiled and put out his hand to shake hers. But Karen looked at his hand like it was something dangerous. Now, as thunder made noise in the sky, Karen's big SUV came down the street. She got out with a clipboard in her hands. Her mouth was tight with anger. "Mr. Tate," she called out. Her voice cut through the thick, hot air. "Your mailbox is leaning again. And that plant, it's not allowed." Marcus turned around. His jaw was tight with anger. "Karen, it's just a fern. It's not hurting anyone. It's about having standards," she said in a sharp voice. She wrote something on her clipboard. "This neighborhood has an image to keep up. If you can't follow the rules, maybe you don't belong here." Her words hit Marcus like a slap across the face. He felt the old anger start to rise inside him. The kind of anger he buried deep down after leaving the army. He took a deep breath and thought about Aaliyah's face. "I'm doing my best," he said in a calm voice. "I'm raising my daughter alone. Maybe you could give me a break." Karen's eyes got smaller and meaner. "Excuses don't help property values." She turned around and walked away. Her high heels made clicking sounds on the street. Marcus watched her leave. His hands made fists in his pockets. He wasn't just fighting Karen's stupid rules. He was fighting against the whispers behind his back. He was fighting against the stares from neighbors. He was fighting against the way people crossed to the other side of the street when they saw him coming. He was fighting to make a home for Aaliyah in a place that didn't seem to want them there. The next day the storm came hard. Rain hit Willow Creek like bullets, turning the streets into rivers. Marcus was at the community center helping to put up sandbags to stop the flooding. He did this kind of work quietly without wanting praise. It reminded him of his time in the army, helping people, protecting them, being useful. Aaliyah was with him, sitting in a corner with crayons and paper. Her stuffed bunny sat beside her. Karen showed up at the center with a wet umbrella. She said she came to watch over things, but Marcus knew she was there to find fault with everything. She complained about where the sandbags were placed. She complained about how fast the volunteers worked. She even complained about the way Marcus tied the bags closed. "Messy work," she said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "Some people just don't know how to do things right." Marcus ignored her and kept working. But then Aaliyah got up and walked over to him. Her small shoes made splashing sounds in a puddle. "Daddy, look," she said happily. She held up her drawing, a bright, messy picture of a rainbow with lots of colors. Karen's mean eyes looked at Aaliyah. "Children shouldn't be here. It's dangerous." Marcus felt his heart beat faster. "She's fine. She's with me." Karen stepped closer. Her voice was low but full of poison. You think you can just walk in here and act like you belong? I know what kind of person you are. You're trouble and you're making this neighborhood worse. The whole room went quiet. The volunteers stopped working and looked back and forth between Marcus and Karen. Marcus felt the weight of everyone staring at him. He felt their silent judgment. He wanted to yell at her. He wanted to tell her about the nights he spent saving soldiers' lives in war zones. He wanted to tell her about the medals he earned for being brave. He wanted to tell her about raising his daughter alone after his wife died giving birth. But no words came out. All he could do was pick up Aaliyah in his arms and walk out into the rain. That night, Marcus sat in his living room. Aaliyah was sleeping upstairs. The rain hit the windows hard and his thoughts were like a storm too. Karen's words kept playing in his head, "You don't belong here." He had heard these words before in different ways his whole life. But now they hurt more because they weren't just about him. They were about Aaliyah too. Marcus remembered his childhood. Growing up, he moved from foster home to foster home. Nobody ever wanted to keep him for long. When he turned 18, he joined the army because he had nowhere else to go. The army became his family. It gave him purpose and taught him how to save lives. Then he met Sarah, a nurse at the base hospital. She was kind and beautiful, with a smile that could light up any room. They fell in love quickly and got married after dating for only 6 months. When Sarah got pregnant with Aaliyah, they were so happy. They made plans for their future together. But during the birth, something went wrong. Sarah started bleeding and couldn't stop. Marcus held her hand as the doctors tried to save her. "Take care of our baby girl," she whispered before closing her eyes forever. That was 3 years ago, but the pain still felt fresh every day. After Sarah died, Marcus left the army. He couldn't focus on his work anymore. All he could think about was being a good father to Aaliyah. He used his military benefits to buy the small house in Willow Creek. He thought it would be a good place to raise his daughter. A safe, quiet neighborhood with good schools nearby. But he didn't expect people like Karen to make his life so difficult. Marcus looked at a picture of Sarah on the table next to him. "I'm trying, baby," he whispered to the photo. "I'm trying to give her a good life. But it's so hard when people look at us like we don't belong." He didn't know that the real storm was still coming. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the air still felt heavy and tense. Marcus was outside fixing his mailbox, Karen's latest complaint, when he heard car tires making loud screeching sounds. A big black SUV came around the corner too fast. The driver was Karen's husband, Tom. Tom was a big, heavy man with an angry face that matched his wife's mean personality. But today something was different. Tom was drunk. His face was red and he could barely walk straight as he got out of the car. In his hand was a gun. "You!" Tom shouted, pointing the gun at Marcus. "You're the one causing all the trouble around here." Marcus felt his blood turn cold. He put his hands up in the air. "Tom, put that gun down. Let's talk about this like adults." "Talk." Tom's words were slurred and hard to understand. He stepped closer, almost falling over. "You think you can come here and ruin our neighborhood? Karen told me all about you. You're dangerous." Marcus could smell the alcohol on Tom's breath from several feet away. He had dealt with drunk and angry people before in the army. The key was to stay calm and not make any sudden moves. But then he heard a sound that made his heart stop. "Daddy?" Aaliyah had been playing on the front porch. When she saw the gun, she got scared and started running toward her father. "Aaliyah, stay back," Marcus shouted. But his little girl was too frightened to understand. She kept running. Marcus didn't think. He just moved. His body jumped between his daughter and Tom, just like he had protected wounded soldiers in the war. Time seemed to slow down. He could see raindrops still hanging in the air from the storm. He could hear Aaliyah's cry echoing in his ears. He saw Tom's finger moving on the gun's trigger. Then a loud bang filled the air. Pain exploded in Marcus's shoulder like fire. The bullet hit him hard, spinning him around. But he didn't fall down. He couldn't fall down. Aaliyah was behind him and she was safe. That was all that mattered. He pressed his hand against his shoulder and blood came through his fingers. He looked straight at Tom with steady eyes. "You don't get to hurt her," he said. His voice was strong even though he was in terrible pain. Tom looked at what he had done. His drunk anger suddenly turned into horror and shame. The gun fell out of his shaking hand onto the wet ground. He dropped to his knees and started crying like a baby. "Oh God, what did I do? What did I do?" Neighbors came running out of their houses when they heard the gunshot. Mrs. Chin from across the street was already calling 911 on her phone. Mr. Rodriguez from next door ran over to help Marcus. "Don't move," he said. "The ambulance is coming." Marcus knelt down and pulled Aaliyah into his good arm. She was crying and shaking. "It's okay, baby," he whispered in her ear. "Daddy's here. Daddy's going to be okay." The hospital was full of bright white walls and machines that made beeping sounds. Marcus lay in a bed with his shoulder wrapped up in bandages. The doctor said he was lucky. The bullet missed all the important parts inside his shoulder. It would hurt for a while, but he would be fine. Aaliyah sat on the hospital bed next to him. She held her stuffed bunny very tight. Her eyes were big and scared. "Daddy, does it hurt?" she asked in a tiny voice. "A little bit," Marcus said honestly. "But I'm okay. I'll always be okay for you, princess." 2 police officers came to talk to Marcus. They asked him what happened and wrote everything down in a notebook. They told him that Tom was arrested and would go to jail. They also said that Marcus was a hero for protecting his daughter. Karen came to the hospital too. She stood in the waiting room looking very pale and scared. For the first time since Marcus had known her, she was quiet. She didn't have her clipboard. She didn't have any complaints. She just looked like a woman who realized that her hate had almost caused someone to die. Word spread quickly through Willow Creek about what happened. But this time the whispers were different. People weren't talking bad things about Marcus anymore. They were talking about how brave he was. They talked about how he risked his life to save his daughter. They started asking questions about Marcus that they should have asked a long time ago. Mrs. Jenkins was an old woman who lived 3 houses down from Marcus. She had always kept to herself and never talked to anyone. But the day after the shooting, she knocked on Marcus's door. She was holding a warm casserole dish in her hands, and her eyes were red from crying. "I saw what you did," she said in a shaky voice. "You're a good man, Marcus. I'm sorry I didn't tell you that before now." More neighbors started coming by. A young married couple named Jake and Emma brought flowers. A teenager named David offered to cut Marcus's grass while his shoulder healed. Slowly, one by one, the people of Willow Creek began to see Marcus differently. Not as a troublemaker or an outsider, but as a father, a hero, a man who would do anything to protect his child. But not everyone was ready to change. Karen was falling apart. The HOA board had an emergency meeting and voted to remove her from her position. They said her behavior toward Marcus had created the tension that led to the shooting. Karen tried to fight their decision, but nobody would listen to her anymore. 3 days after Marcus came home from the hospital, Karen showed up at his front door. She looked terrible. Her hair was messy, her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and her hands were shaking. "I need to talk to you," she said in a voice that was barely above a whisper. Marcus opened the door wider and let her inside. They sat in his living room, the same room where he had worried about belonging in this neighborhood just a few days before. "I didn't know this would happen," Karen said. Tears started falling down her face. "I didn't want anyone to get hurt." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. His shoulder still hurt, and he could see the fear in Aaliyah's eyes every time she looked at him. "You didn't pull the trigger, Karen," he said slowly. "But your hate and anger loaded the gun." Karen flinched like he had hit her. "I was wrong," she admitted. "About you, about everything. I don't know how to fix this." Marcus studied her face. He could see that she was truly sorry, but sorry wasn't enough to erase what had happened. "Fixing this isn't going to be easy," he said. "And it's not going to happen overnight. But maybe if you really want to change, we can start somewhere." Karen nodded through her tears. "I want to try. I want to be better." Marcus didn't forgive her right then. Forgiveness would take time. But he could see that she was finally ready to look at herself honestly. And that was a beginning. Weeks passed and Willow Creek started to change in small but important ways. The new HOA board threw out most of Karen's strict rules. Instead of focusing on making everything look perfect, they focused on bringing the community together. They organized block parties and neighborhood cleanup days. They created a playground fund so kids would have a better place to play. Marcus became a quiet leader in these changes. People looked up to him now. They asked for his opinion on important decisions. He organized activities for the children, including Aaliyah and the other kids on the street. His lawn still wasn't perfect. There were a few weeds and some brown spots, but nobody cared about that anymore. Aaliyah bounced back faster than Marcus expected. Children are strong that way. She started drawing rainbow pictures for every neighbor on the street. She would skip down the sidewalk with her stuffed bunny, handing out her colorful drawings and making people smile. Her laughter filled the air, and Marcus felt his heart grow warm every time he heard it. Mrs. Jenkins became like a grandmother to Aaliyah. She would sit on Marcus's front porch in the evenings, telling stories about the old days when Willow Creek was first built. Aaliyah would curl up in her lap, listening with wide eyes as Mrs. Jenkins talked about families who had lived there before. "This used to be such a friendly place," Mrs. Jenkins told Marcus one evening as they watched Aaliyah play in the front yard. "People looked out for each other. Then somewhere along the way we forgot what was important. You reminded us." Marcus shook his head. "I just wanted a safe home for my daughter. And you gave the rest of us a home too," Mrs. Jenkins said with a gentle smile. The sky above them was clear that evening. Stars were beginning to appear as the sun went down. Marcus held Aaliyah in his lap, feeling grateful for how much their life had changed. He had faced storms, both in the weather and in people's hearts, but they had come through stronger. Karen was trying to change too, though it was harder for her than for anyone else. She started volunteering at the community center, helping to serve meals to families who didn't have much money. She worked quietly without trying to take charge like she used to. Sometimes Marcus would see her there and they would nod to each other. It wasn't friendship yet, but it wasn't hate anymore either. 6 months after the shooting, the people of Willow Creek held a big neighborhood barbecue at the community center. The smell of grilled burgers and hot dogs filled the air. Children ran through the grass playing tag and laughing. Music played softly from speakers, and families sat at picnic tables sharing food and stories. Marcus stood at one of the grills, flipping hamburgers and hot dogs. He wore a light shirt that showed the scar on his shoulder, but he wasn't ashamed of it anymore. That scar was proof that he would do anything to protect the people he loved. Aaliyah ran up to him, tugging on his sleeve. "Daddy, look what I made." She held up her newest drawing. This one showed their house with lots of people around it, all their neighbors, all their new friends. At the top of the picture was a bright rainbow with every color she could think of. "It's beautiful, princess," Marcus said, kneeling down to hug her with his good arm. "Just like you." Karen was at the barbecue too, but she stayed in the background helping to serve drinks and clean up tables. She had lost a lot of weight and looked older than before. The stress of realizing how wrong she had been was hard on her. But she kept coming to community events, kept volunteering, kept trying to make up for the damage she had caused. As the sun started to go down, Marcus found himself standing near Karen at the drink table. For a moment they looked at each other without saying anything. Then Karen spoke very quietly. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" Marcus asked. "For not giving up on this place. For showing us what we could be." Marcus considered her words. "We all deserve a second chance, Karen. Even you." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes again. "I'm going to keep trying to be better." "I know you will," Marcus said. As darkness settled over Willow Creek, Marcus looked around at his neighbors, his daughter, his home. He had been many things in his life: a foster child, a soldier, a medic, a widowed father. He had faced war and loss and prejudice. He had been shot protecting his daughter. But here, in this moment, surrounded by people who had learned to see past the color of his skin to the content of his character, he was simply Marcus. A man who had shown a whole neighborhood what courage and love looked like. Aaliyah's laughter rang out across the community center yard as she chased fireflies with the other children. The sound filled Marcus with peace. This was what he had been fighting for all along, not just a house but a home. Not just a place to live but a place to belong. And as he watched the stars appear one by one in the clear night sky, Marcus Tate knew that he and Aaliyah had finally found their place in the world.